Tuareg movie recaps.
Set in 1937, the film begins at Kyoto University, Japan, where several fighters from the Black Dragon clan appear, an ultranationalist group that wants to expel all Chinese students. At that time, the war between China and Japan was almost over. To start, then the fighters confront Shenzhen, a Chinese student who was only taking classes after disrespecting the teacher and several students. The Japanese thugs are heading towards their target. Although Mitsuko, Chen's partner and girlfriend, stands in their way when she sees that they are capable of hurting her partner, Chen stands up to them by finishing off with a few quick movements of China, a martial art specialized in limb training. And also in breaking bones. Even though he was not outnumbered, Chen hits several at the same time until Funakoshi, the bully sensei and Mitsuko's uncle, appears. The man immediately apologizes for the actions of his students and begins to straighten his limbs. After that, Funakoshi is impressed with Chen's skills, who reveals that he was trained by Sensei Wan for his misfortune. Funakoshi informs him that he died recently in a fight in Shanghai. At the hands of a Japanese karateka named Akutagawa. You barely hear that. Chen says goodbye to Mitsuko and returns to China, even though the Japanese are taking over the country. In the next scene we see him arrive at the doingo of his sensei, who they were watching over at that moment. Now the doll is in charge of Joaquin's son, who is as skilled in combat as his father. In fact, he often receives several senseis from other regions only to defeat them in a few seconds. Seeing Chen Ting, he welcomes him as a member of the family and allows him to honor his father at his altar. Chen then immediately heads to the Japanese dojo and Hachuan in search of Akutagawa. Of course, the karatekas receive him with hostility for being Chinese, although Chan makes it clear to them that they are on his territory with punches and kicks. Any technique is valid in times of war. Chan distributes punches everywhere and incapacitates several at the same time. Needless to say, he hasn't suffered a single scratch. In this way he manages to break the wooden staff of the best karateka and orders him to call his teacher. Finally, Sensei Akakawa accepts the duel, although he did not expect to receive a beating every time he approached his rival, taking advantage of Akutagawa's surroundings and weak points. Chen manages to make a fool of him to the point that he throws him around as if he were a toy. Chen stops after that, deducing that someone so weak couldn't have killed his teacher single-handedly. Therefore, the young man orders that one be dug up so that an expert can perform an autopsy. Thanks to that Chenny, the Dollywood students discover that his sensei was poisoned shortly before he died, which explains why he lost to Akutagawa. Then the protagonist begins to train like never before. To stop the murderer, while the other fighters admire their efforts, Chen teaches them the game punch and various fighting techniques, making it clear to them that simple movements are more effective than flashy ones. He even gives a tremendous kick to a volunteer. To show you his point. As a result, the students preferred to take classes from Chen instead of his tin ilk teacher, who begins to feel jealous as a consolation. Tai visits his lover Xiao, a prostitute from a brothel, at night. Even though he loves her, the sensei does not dare to make her affair public to protect her reputation. On the other hand, Akutagawa is summoned by a Japanese ambassador and General Fujita of the Imperial Japanese Army, who scolds him for receiving a beating from a Chinese man. Given this, Akutagawa states that he should have faced Wan without advantage and gets upset with Fujita for poisoning him. I think the general took it a little personally. Back with Chain we see that his fighting skills and his perseverance make him a Shanghai idol. However, that reputation collapses when Dougie Chon's karatekas discover the body of his sensei along with a note signed by Chen. Immediately, the Japanese burst into Jingu armed with katanas, so you and your students stand up to them. While Chen returns from a jog despite the fact that his enemies had sharp weapons, Tim begins to defeat them with a simple wooden stick, even not caring about damaging his own doll in order to hit them. After a few intense minutes, the altercation is stopped by local authorities just as Chen returns to the dojo. he is forced to surrender to the police for the alleged murder of Akutagawa. Unfortunately for him, Chen's trial was rigged by General Fujita, who brought in a bunch of false witnesses to testify against him. But since those witnesses did not seem reliable, the judge calls a Japanese woman, Mitsuko, who assures that Chen could not commit that murder because they spent the night together. These statements cause fury in viewers, both good and bad. Thanks to that testimony, Shen case dismissed. After that, Mitsuko confesses that she gave up her entire life in Japan to help him, so she can't return. The problem is that no one wants to receive her in Jingu because of her nationality. So the sensei gives him an ultimatum: march or go with his girlfriend or stay in the dojo. As the young man did not want to make any decision, Tinilk challenges him to a fight. See, Chingana will be the new sensei, but if he loses, he will have to break up with Michuko. At that moment, Chen limits himself to dodging and resisting Tincture's attacks out of respect, not even daring to hit him no matter how many times he was holding up well that way until he hears some students denigrating Mitsuko. Therefore, Chen attacks Latin for the first time with a flying kick. After that, he gives him a swift beating that leaves him on the ground. That made Chen the new sensei, although he rejects that position and prefers to leave with his girlfriend after being humiliated in a hotel for Mitsuko's nationality. The couple has no choice but to settle in a ruined cabin on the outskirts of the town city. On the other hand, a Japanese karateka appears in Jingu to inform them that Funakoshi wants to challenge his sensei. This alarms everyone in the dojo, since Sting had refused to return after being humiliated in combat, while the local cook secretly meets with a student who turns out to be a Japanese spy. The cook had understood that the Japanese would free his son if he poisoned wood, but that has not happened. That's why the cook tried to reveal the truth to others, although the spy ends up hanging him when the authorities take his body and find an ingredient used for asthma. So they deduce that she died of that illness shortly after. The ink lover appears at the dojo to talk to her second in command. Nong Xiao takes him to his brothel to reason with a drunk. Ting the sensei had no intention of returning to his domain, especially since they already knew about their forbidden relationship, although he changes his mind due to Funakoshi's challenge. As for Xiaohong, she allows him to join the dojo with the rest of the women while Things prepares for combat. It was one thing and it does the same thing. Even though he is being forced by Fujita, he still reminds her that he is no politician, just a martial arts master. Days later, Funakoshi shows up at Chen's cabin, because Fujita had ordered her to finish him off even though he is an old man. Funakoshi surprises Chen with flying kicks and fast attacks. Then Chen counters with greater brutality and a different fighting style. That's why Funakoshi begins to repeat his tactics. Suddenly a strong gust of wind hits the place and affects the Japanese man's vision, so both fighters cover their eyes to be equal. In this way, the two continue the fight relying purely on the rest of their senses, after distributing blows, kicks, and holds. They both agree to end in a draw. Furthermore, Funakoshi does not want to kill him, although before leaving he warns him that Fujita was personally for him. Some time later, Ting visits Chen's cabin to apologize for his behavior and accept him back into the dojo with Mitsuko to seal their reconciliation. They both share fighting tactics in that Tinilk teaches him a style of martial art called Mizong, based on deception and mobility. Until now the Mizon was an exclusive style of his family, but things have changed after Tim Chang's visit. He discovers that Mitsuko has gone and only left a letter in her. The woman expresses that she does not want to become a problem because of her nationality, and that she will be waiting for him at Kyoto University. On the other hand, Fujita tests her physique by resisting a hail of spankings, hitting nails and destroying rocks without even breaking a sweat. Later, Tim shows up at his doll to accept his challenge with Chen as his companion. At that point the general summons the Japanese spy of his students to identify him as Hugo's murderer, killing him with a bullet. After that, Fujita shows them a sign that symbolizes Jin Wu's closure. Sting is the first to attack, but his attacks bounce off the general, who, without even moving from his position, knocks him out with several blows. Then comes Chen's turn, who poses a more even challenge to the Japanese. Even though he was resisting at first, Chen begins to succumb to his enemy's attacks until he ends up on the floor. Surprisingly, the protagonist gets up for a second round, combining various combat tactics with the elements of the environment to put Fujita in trouble. However, the general responds with more force, injuring our hero's arm. Just then he notices an open wound on his rival that is dripping blood and obstructing his vision. He immediately tries to take advantage of that situation with a flying kick, but Fujita intercepts him in the air and smashes him to the ground. Again Chen rejoins for a third round in which he manages to rearrange his arm. In that, the protagonist connects a good combo of blows that seem to give him victory. Although then Fujita tries to execute him star. Once again, Chenny puts him against the ropes with quick blows and a tremendous flying kick that pushes Fujita into a rack of Catalans when she sees that his rival was knocked out. Chen gets up to leave, but suddenly Fujita surprises him with a katana, stabbing him in the arm. Faced with this new threat, Chen uses his belt as a whip to keep him at a distance. With that improvised weapon he gets you to use the katana against him, ending it once and for all. With him, when they try to leave, Chen and things are intercepted by Japanese soldiers, although they do not, and the local police appear to help them to avoid a massacre. The Japanese ambassador demands that Fujita's assassin surrender, otherwise the general's death in Chinese territory will spark a war between both countries. Recognizing this, Chen does not hesitate to turn himself in as a scapegoat. Immediately afterward, shots are heard and the Japanese leave the premises with a body. As a result, Shanghai begins to be flooded with legends of Chen, the hero who sacrificed himself for peace. Fortunately, those legends were nothing more than that, because the ambassador, moved by Chen's attitude, decided to fake his death with Fujita's corpse. Thanks to that, Chen is able to retire to another region with his great love Mitsuko, and that's how this movie ends. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and thanks for watching.